Good morning, Year 5. Welcome to your last English lesson for the week. We are going to be writing a contrasting character description today. So hopefully you can use adjectives to describe, particularly using expanding noun phrases as we have done earlier in the week. Use interesting and imaginative vocabulary and include a description of a character's personality, which we've been working towards, haven't we, this week? We started doing that a little bit for Mr. Tomness. Before you do that though, we've been looking at, we are looking for our starter at contrasting conjunctions. So we've learned about these before, you learned about them in Year 4, and you also learned about them when we did balanced arguments. So here are some examples. Whereas, instead of, alternatively, otherwise, unlike, and on the other hand. So they are words that link sentences together and can help to create cohesion between sentences. But what they do is although they link the sentences together, it creates where one sentence disagrees almost with the next. So it shows you that disagreement. So what I would like you to do, is have a go at writing 3 sentences, including a contrasting conjunction. Now, I used an example the other day. I loved the movie. However, Katie did not. Okay, so I've used the word however, which is not on that list, but is still a contrasting conjunction. I could put whereas Katie did not. On the other hand, Katie did not. So pause the video here and go and have a go at your starter. Welcome back. We're going to listen to chapter 3 of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and we're going to do that using a video. I am going to try and share the sound with you, and hopefully it works really well today. I know we've had problems before, but just have a listen.
The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, Chapter 3, Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other 3. "It's all right," she repeated. "I've come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asked Susan. "Why?" said Lucy in amazement. "Haven't you all been wondering where I was?" "So you've been hiding, have you?" said Peter. "Poor old Lou, hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. "Batty," said Edmund, tapping his head. "Quite batty." "What do you mean, Lou?" asked Peter. "What I said," answered Lucy. "It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours and had tea and all sorts of things have happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago, and you were there then." "She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's just making up a story for fun, aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't she?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see." The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, "Now, go in and see for yourselves." "Why, you goose," said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it." Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of the wardrobe, with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. "A jolly good hoax, Lou," he said as he came out again. "You have really taken us in, I must admit. We half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly. It was all different a moment ago. Honestly it was. I promise." "Come, Lou," said Peter. "That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days, she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy, and kept on asking her if she'd found any other new countries in other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine, and they were out of doors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, and so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it, for by this time, she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the Fawn had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside, and then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it was very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it is not a magic one. Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and darkness and silence, and no sign of Lucy. "She thinks I'm Susan come to catch her," said Edmund to himself, "and so she's keeping very quiet in at the back." He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds, and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all, and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here." There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open of its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went towards the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe. But instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadow of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. There was crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead, there was pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun, just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out not to have been imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too! Edmund!" There was no answer. "She's angry about all the things I've been saying lately," thought Edmund. And though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place, so he shouted again, "I say, Lou! I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see now you were right all along. Do come out. Make it Pax." Still there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund to himself, sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology. He looked round him again and decided he did not much like this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home, when he heard, very far off in the wood, a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sledge drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in a polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug, but behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long, strange golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was a fine sight as it came sweeping towards Edmund with bells jingling and the dwarf cracking his whip, and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop," said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharp that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood champing their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund, rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she asked, looking sterner than ever. "I beg your pardon, your majesty, I didn't know," said Edmund. "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried she. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter, but I repeat, what are you?" "Please, your majesty," said Edmund, "I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. At least, I was. It's the holidays now."
Fabulous. And that is the end of chapter 3. So, what do we think of the White Witch so far? What do we know about her? Have a little think. I'm going to add a couple of bits to my mind map. You can create a quick mind map if you want to. So one of the things we know about her is she seems to be the Queen of Narnia. She offers him some Turkish delight, doesn't she? She lets him have some of that. She seems quite kind, doesn't she? She seems like an okay character. She seems relatively pleasant. She offers Edmund food just the same as Mr. Thomas did for Lucy, so perhaps she's a little bit open friendly as well. She doesn't seem as nice, but she seems alright, doesn't she? She seems very much like she wants to befriend Edmund. And of course your mind map will probably have more than mine does. So we're going to carry on reading. I'm going to read to you for a little while, not very much, a couple of pages. And I want you to think about whether or not your opinion of her changes. So, Chapter 4, Turkish Delight. "But what are you?" said the Queen again. "Are you a great overgrown dwarf that has cut off his beard?" "No, your majesty," said Edmund. "I had never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy," she said. "Do you mean you are a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, saying nothing. He was too confused by this time to understand what the question meant. "I see you are an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the Queen. "Answer me once and for all. or I shall lose my patience. Are you a human?" "Yes, Your Majesty," said Edmund. "And how, pray, did you come to enter my dominions?" "Please, Your Majesty, I came through the wardrobe." "A wardrobe? What do you mean?" I opened a door and just found myself here, Your Majesty," said Edmund. "Ha!" said the Queen, speaking more to herself than him. A door from the world of men. I have heard of such things. This may recall, but he is only one, and he is easily dealt with." As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming at the same moment she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure that she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for lost, she appeared to change her mind. "My poor child," she said in quite a different voice. "How cold you look. Come and sit with me here on my sledge, and I will put my mantle around you, and we will talk." Edmund did not like this arrangement at all, but he dared not disobey. He stepped onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur mantle around him and tucked it in well. "Perhaps something hot to drink," said the Queen. "Should you like that?" "Yes, please, Your Majesty," said Edmund, whose teeth were chattering. The Queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a very small bottle which looked as if it were made of copper. Then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall from it on the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second in mid-air, shining like a diamond. But the moment it touched the snow, there was a hissing sound, and there stood a jeweled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately took this and handed it to Edmund with a bow and a smile. Not a very nice smile. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before, very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. "It is dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating," said the Queen presently. "What do you like the best to eat?" "Turkish delight, please, Your Majesty," said Edmund. The Queen let out another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Each piece was sweet and light to the very centre, and Edmund had never tasted anything more delicious. He was quite warm now and very comfortable. While he was eating, the Queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it is rude to speak with one's mouth full, but soon he forgot about this and thought only of trying to shovel down as much Turkish delight as he could. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat, and he never asked himself why the Queen should be so inquisitive. She got him to tell her that he had one brother and two sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and had met a faun there, and that no one except himself and his brother and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them, and kept coming back to it. "You are sure there are just 4 of you?" she asked. 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, neither more nor less." And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, kept on saying, "Yes, I told you that before," and forgetting to call her Your Majesty. But she didn't seem to mind now. At last, the Turkish delight was all finished, and Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she would ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the Queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was enchanted Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted it would want more and more of it, and would even, if they were allowed, go on eating it until they killed themselves. But she did not offer him any more. Instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to see your brothers and your brother and your two sisters. Will you bring them to me?" And that is where I'm going to stop for now. Has our opinion of the White Witch changed? What do you think of her now? Is there anything else that we can learn about the White Witch? For example, we know that she's inquisitive. She's got a bit of an obsession about the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. What do you think Edmund thinks? So just have a think about those questions. If you created a mind map before, then make sure that you add to it. Of course, Edmund thinks she's quite okay. He's a bit concerned that he had to go and sit on her sled, isn't he? But he's quite happy with the fact that she's fed him Turkish delight. There was a part there where she got a bit abrupt and a bit nasty. But then she kind of changed her tune when Edmund started to tell her the information that she wanted. So this week we have been focusing on describing characters, so including their thoughts and feelings. Today you're going to be using what we've learned to write about the White Witch and try and make comparisons to Mr. Tumnus. So before you do that, take a bit of time to think about the two different characters. You might decide that to help you, you could create a grid of or a table of similarities and differences, because that might help to start to describe them both. Okay, but once you've done that, if you choose to, you're going to actually start to write about the White Witch. So although, like Mr. Tumnus, I'm not going to write a huge amount. The White Witch comes across as friendly, kind, beverage being a drink. Although, like Mr. Tumnus, the White Witch comes across as friendly and kind, offering Edmund a hot beverage. I'm going to click back to the start and have a look for a contrasting conjunction. Oh, I'm not sure. She's a more she's a sly character who is right, who is is also very demanding and abrupt. She uses short commands when talking to as those below her as in her subject. So I've started you off, use that if you want to, but you are using comparing and contrasting conjunctions to write about the White Witch, and you can make comparisons to Mr. Tumnus. So it's something similar about them is that they've both tried to befriend one of the children for their own benefit, basically, haven't they? Okay, so that's something similar about them. There are many, many differences. Have a good go. As I said, create a table if you need to of similarities and differences before you start writing, and hopefully that will help you quite a bit. I look forward to seeing them, and have a lovely rest of the day. See you later.